Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bloom. I am so excited to see all the new and very familiar names in the chat. So, for the ones who have not attended one of our live discussions, I want to introduce myself. My name is Zakia Lott, and I'm the host and founder here at Bloom. So, Bloom is a wellness platform, and we host various conversations centered around the empowerment of women. And there's no conversation that's off the table as long as we know that women are in the forefront so they can feel enriched and empowered. And so, our next guest, who's also the contributing writer for Bloom, Cindy Small, is an amazing addition to the team, not only because of her amazing writing skills and her storytelling abilities, but she has some very unique family and life experiences that she's going to bring to the platform and help enrich us all. Her story is of a woman. I'll let her tell it. Obviously, women tell their own stories best. But her story is shows me that anything is possible, no matter what type of trauma that you have been through in your life. And so I know for a fact that by listening to Cindy's stories, that you will feel empowered, you will feel seen, and you will feel heard. And I am so excited to welcome her to the Bloom family so we can continue to do some amazing work together. And without further ado, I would like you all to meet Miss Cindy Small, contributing writer for Bloom.
Hi.
Hi,
Good
Cindy.
evening. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. First of all, you look amazing. You look fabulous. I was telling everyone, I was talking to you earlier and telling you about your lipstick and your hair, but
Oh,
I want to be like you when I grow up.
oh God. Well, thank you. Thank
Of
you.
course. But, I really appreciate your vulnerability because this is something that's very challenging for people to do. And you and I have talked about this in great detail. Sometimes when people go through trauma, they isolate themselves and become embarrassed. And so, knowing someone like you is really a privilege and an honor to know that you're dedicating your life's work to not only using your stories to help people, but you've done the healing yourself, and now you're using your stories as a platform to bring healing to others. So first and foremost, I want to thank you so much
My
um,
pleasure.
for the meaningful work that you're doing. So enough of me talking. I want to also before I forget, let everyone know who has not attended before that this is a very interactive experience. So feel free to comment, ask questions as we continue to move along. But Cindy, I want to let you tell your story. Tell us about you.
Well, my story begins. Actually, I think that when the lottery tickets were given out and I was dropped into the universe, the barcode on my lottery ticket was missing because somehow I ended up in a family that was very similar to a circus. Only it wasn't a circus. It was a group of immigrants, my grandparents and my parents, who came to New Orleans from Vienna, Austria. It was during the Hitler years. And they arrived and they set up a small community with other immigrants. And it didn't take them long to find their paths. They learned English quickly. They had very thick accents, but they learned English, and they were all very driven, but not in such a good way. Um, my mother, in particular, and my grandmother opened up a X-rated pornographic lingerie store that was located next to the Roosevelt Hotel in downtown New Orleans. And my grandmother hired me at about 4 years old to work in the store. My job was to sit on a bar stool behind the showcase and sew satin bows on pieces of lingerie, garter belts, pants, very X rated material. And I can remember at that age pricking my fingers on the material and bleeding on them sometimes. Of
Mm.
course, I didn't say a word, but I hated those bows. I really, really hated them. Before I knew it, I was 6, and my grandmother insisted that I start waiting on customers. And the clientele in that store in particular were exotic dancers, they were, strippers and prostitutes and drag queens and, businessmen from the hotel next door. And I don't know what didn't feel right at that young age, but I had a very queasy feeling about everything that was happening in that store. My
Mm.
young mind couldn't figure it out, but I didn't even like touching the merchandise. It made me extremely uncomfortable. The businessmen would come in, and even though I didn't really understand what they were joking about, it just didn't feel good. Um, the dancers would come in and they would go in the circular dressing room with my grandmother and try on uh, pasties and outfits that they would use. And I was most uncomfortable watching all that take place.
Mm.
My grandmother was the jaws of life when it came to selling, and they would walk out with shopping bags full of merchandise. But my road to journalism occurred because I think that the environment I was in gave me a case of ADD, even though I didn't know it at the time. There was too much going on
Mm.
and it was unhealthy, but I didn't know why. And when I went to school, and it wasn't often, and my grades were very poor,
Mm.
um, the teachers that I had in English in particular, they would always say to me, "You write so well, you have such a vivid imagination." Well, the fact was, I didn't have an imagination. I was writing about real life.
Mm.
And so that was the track that I went on to reach the road of journalism and writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's a lot to digest. I
it
know.
is. And I go back and I know we have a lot of mothers here as well, in the chat and just listening to the discussion. But the thought of someone as young as 4 and 6 being exposed to those type of environments, working with strippers and prostitutes and seeing lingerie. I mean, that's a lot for anyone to take in, let alone a child. Um, did you have outbursts at that time where you were hoping to get some type of consolement or understanding maybe at that time that you didn't receive it? How did that?
No, I was forced into a situation. I had no choice. Of course, at that age, I
Mhm.
had to do what I was told. And it was impossible for me at that point in time to get out of that situation. Impossible. So I just simply had to bite the sheet metal and do what I needed to do until I grew a little older. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. We have a picture, I believe, of some of the lingerie that your mother used to sell in her store as well. And so you would have to, so you would sew this lingerie at the age of, you said, what, as young as 6?
Yes. 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 My grandmother designed the brochure. It's actually the only brochure that I have. It's from the late 40s. And she designed it, she imported the material, and those were just a few of the pieces. Actually, those aren't nearly as X-rated as others that were in the shop. But yes, that's the real thing.
Talk to us a little bit about, as far as your journey. Obviously, you've had tons of healing to be even able to talk about this today. But talk to us about the impact that it had on you mentally and developmentally as well, to experience such things at a young age, even at an age when you didn't initially understand what was going on.
Well, interestingly, every family member of mine had a different career path when they came to the United States. And my mother chose the career path of being the captain of a Mardi Gras organization in New Orleans.
Mhm.
And that was a Herculean task that she did actually very well. She had 1,500 crew members. This was an all-female crew, and there were about 75 floats that paraded around Mardi Gras time. But it
Mhm.
took the entire year for her to produce this. It was absolutely a huge production. And it was interesting because, the people that made the greatest impact on me were the gay costume designers that she hired in and out of the state, and they were incredible. They created unimaginable headpieces. They created trains that would go on the gowns that would fit whatever the headline was. If the
Mhm.
headline was, let's say, "Welcome to New York," these people would actually build mini versions of New York City on the trains,
Wow.
and the women would walk in the auditorium with these things with the orchestra playing. So my mother was a bigger than life person,
Mm.
and I was very, very much in the shadow. Um, she, just very briefly, she looked a lot like, Katharine Hepburn. She had auburn hair and blue eyes, and occasionally she would spray her hair gold for the shock effect. And she would always wear plunging necklines on sequin dresses in the day, and hose, and very, very high heels. Um, that you're looking at is just a Sunday afternoon. It's not a
Mhm.
special occasion.
Yes.
I think my mother, who is in back of me, I'm the little person, um, she was trying to bring old Vienna to the Big Easy in these
Mhm.
productions. My grandmother's on the right-hand side, and although my mother was married for 50 years to my father, she had a lover of 50 years, and that was the person on the other side of her.
Mm.
My
Okay.
father always looked the other way. So I was surrounded by so much, and nothing was ordinary, absolutely nothing. I was an only child, and I didn't have any children to play with. All I knew was putting on these huge productions, watching everything take place. I would be probably around 10, and I'd be up in the top seat of the auditorium looking down and watching these incredible rehearsals. And it was very tiring for me. I
Mm.
think at that age, at about 10, the seeds of my depression started happening. I was very uncomfortable. I was not allowed to be tired. I wasn't allowed to be sad. I wasn't allowed to be uncomfortable. I had to go with the flow. And I was an inconvenience. That was very known to me without a fact. And
Mm.
when my mother would hold her after parties, I would be present, and I'd be the only child. And I was just exhausted watching the whole thing. It was overwhelming for me,
Yeah.
to say the least. It really, really was. I will add to the fact, which I think is really important. My mother became uh, ill pretty soon after she started this huge production. She smoked continuously. She ate a lot of sugar. She had diabetes. And so she ended up going to the doctors a lot. And in so doing, I believe at some point in time, they diagnosed her as bipolar and having multiple personality disorder.
Mm.
And as I look back, it's as clear as crystal that
Yeah.
this was what was going on. And this was without a doubt child endangerment, in
Yeah.
my opinion. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's very clear, and I'm glad you were able to get some type of diagnosis. And when you and I were talking, one of the main reasons why we wanted to have this conversation, and it's very empowering for you to tell your own story. But a lot of the things that you're discussing now, or like we said earlier, are things that people go through, but they don't feel confident enough to share those stories. And I shared with you that I have family members that are schizophrenic. And so I remember even my mother shows signs of schizophrenia, and I would go online and I would try to find articles just to, help cope with some of the experiences, and couldn't find, maybe one woman wrote a blog. So I'm just certain by you sharing your stories that it's going to help people feel seen. So I just want to really, really thank you. So learning that your mother was bipolar and also had multiple personality disorders, did that help your journey towards healing?
No,
Hmm.
that came a little later.
Yeah.
Uh, First of all, my mother, she would sleep all day and work all night. So when it was time for me to go to school in the morning, she would walk in very disheveled. And she could either be in a huge rage over something that I didn't even know about, or she could be on top of the moon after designing a costume that she thought was fabulous, or she could have very childlike behavior.
Mm.
Well, this caused me enormous stress and anxiety. I didn't know what to expect. And I distinctly remember fainting at times, and I would be on the couch in the living room, and I would come to eventually. It wasn't that long of a fainting spell, but it was enough to know that I just couldn't handle all of this. This was going on around me, and
Mhm.
not knowing, and the unpredictability and the
Mhm.
unreliability. I was an adult in a child's body. It
Mhm.
was as simple as that. And as a result of that, I had no rules to abide by. I had no guidelines, and often I didn't go to school. If I didn't feel like going, I wouldn't, and I would get on my bike and I would ride around town all the time, all day. Um, because there was no direction for me. No one told me you had to do this and you had to reach this goal. And I was completely and totally on my own, just like a zombie, trying to figure out where to go and what path to take.
Oh my goodness, Sydney.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So Sean says, did you have any normalcy as a child?
Zero. My normalcy came actually once I was in therapy, and but not until then. And so it was a long time coming, and it involved a lot of scenarios that were extremely hurtful and toxic. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. Wow. LaBarbara also asked, did you ever feel comfortable talking to a teacher or a friend as a confidant during your traumatic experiences as a child?
No, not at all, and I'll tell you why. As far as friends go, I really didn't have any friends. And the reason is because a lot of times people in school would connect the dots with what my family did and me, and they pretty much stayed their distance. Um, But my hero in life was my therapist.
Mm,
And that was the person, just to give you an idea, who really saved my life.
mm,
And it took 10 years of therapy, going 2 times a week, never missing a session, for me to flourish.
wow.
Yeah. There was a lot of damage.
Oh,
There was a tremendous amount of damage.
I can't imagine. I mean, so how did you actually? What was your breaking point, and essentially that made you realize that you could not manage on your own, and that you needed to partner with a therapist?
Well, at about age 30, I was in as worst shape as I could possibly be. I just didn't know what to do with myself. I had more jobs than I could count because I had no confidence. I would go to a job, I would take my lunch hour, decide that everyone hated me, and never come back. So
Mm,
I had many, many jobs. There was no I had no confidence whatsoever. And, one day, I just decided that this life was more than I could bear. And I made the decision to get in my car and drive to one of the worst projects in New Orleans. And
mm,
believe me, there were some pretty bad ones there. And I went, and my wish was that someone would just simply do away with me. The pain
mm,
was just simply too much.
mhm,
So I went to the projects, and then I went back to my car. Nothing happened. And I got home to my home. Um, and at about 7 o'clock in the morning, I looked in the phone book and I saw Jewish Family Services listed. And I called. And a woman answered the phone, and it turned out to be the executive director who came in early for a meeting. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "I'm in crisis." And what came out of her mouth was, "Can you come right away?" And I did.
ooh,
And it was as though it was meant to be that she answered the phone.
mm.
And so began our 10-year client therapist relationship. And I will tell you this, in the 80s, we had answering machines and we had the little tapes that went in. And I would bring those tapes to her because I figured if she could hear these messages from my family, it would speak volumes.
Right.
We would sit there and she would listen to these tapes. And after the tapes were done, I could see in her eyes how shocked she was. And she looked at me and said, "I can't believe that you didn't become a prostitute or a drug dealer, or I just can't believe it."
Yeah.
But we held these sessions religiously for 10 years. And I will tell you what finally changed me. Um, she convinced me to go back to school and to go to college. I needed a job, and so there was an opening at Tulane University for a receptionist, a lowly receptionist making 12,000 a year. And I took the job, and with the job came free tuition
Oh.
at this $100,000 diploma school. So she talked me into taking classes. And I would go to work in the day, work till 5, and then I'd go to class, and I would get home by 10 at night. And I did this constantly without skipping a semester. If I skipped a semester, I'd never go back. And at the end of the road, I received a undergraduate degree in journalism and a master's in historic preservation in the School of Architecture. But what was so interesting about this was I didn't walk on stage. There was no one to watch me. And I went to the registrar's office to get my diplomas in a long cardboard sort of a tube. And I picked them up, those diplomas. And I got back in my car and I drove about a block off campus and I parked on the side of the road and I thought my heart was going to come out of my mouth. I never felt so happy. I felt so much academic achievement from a background of being told that I was retarded, that I
Mm.
was a loser, that I was useless, I had nothing. And I don't think I ever felt that proud of myself in my entire life as to when I looked at that. And
Oh,
that's when I began to flourish.
Oh, Cindy, I see
Yep.
so much strength radiating you right now. I mean, you are a powerful woman. You really, truly are. Wow. I have to ask you, Linda said something. She said, without normalcy as a child, you start to feel isolated from having friends. And that makes sense. That sounds like that directly coincides with exactly what you're saying about your experience as well. You didn't
Yes.
feel open to communicating with other people. But I have to tell you, so asked you, I should say, your therapist mentioned that she was very surprised that you didn't become like a prostitute, for example. Why why do you think your trajectory was so different versus we hear about the horror stories from people who've had very traumatic experiences and, unfortunately, it doesn't end too well. Do you see a difference in what got you here versus what may have got someone else to, not being able to have that success story, unfortunately?
Yes. I came to the conclusion that at certain point in time, I had nothing to fear anymore. Everyone in my family had passed away. The store was closed. No one could hurt me. There was no evil for, for me to be afraid of. The only excess that I couldn't get rid of that easily is I would have nightmares in the night of my childhood and I would scream. And quite frankly, as of about 5 years ago, those nightmares are over. I don't know how, I don't know why, but they ended. And so then I was able to grow. uh, it wasn't easy by no means, but there was no one around to hurt me anymore. And
Mm,
that was what allowed me, I think, to feel free. Yeah,
mm.
yeah,
That's very powerful.
yes, yeah. It's a fact.
So Sean asked, and this is a very good question too. Do you have any suggestions for anyone who may be going through something similar? How do you have any tips on how they can actually partner with the right therapist? In your story, you were actually very blessed to find the right therapist the first time, but oftentimes that doesn't happen for other people.
Yeah.
So can you share some tips today?
Honest to God, it was luck on my
Mm,
part. It was strictly luck. Uh, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I think it's a real gamble. I found the exact right person to put
mm,
me together again. It wasn't exactly like Gorilla Glue. It was more like Elmer's glue because I was kind of wobbly and broken. But there, aside from a therapist, the other thing is when you're in my situation and you come from a very, very cruel background, it's so important to pick the right mate. And the
mhm,
goddess must have looked down at me, and my spouse is very, very caring and trustworthy and reliable. And those things are so much more important than money, and so much more important than a career, because someone like me needs that. And
yeah.
if you're in my position, you must have that in another human being,
Mhm.
someone that you can completely rely on, because I was always on high alert of what would happen next. So, my advice is if you can't find that in a person, it's better to be alone or get a dog or a cat. But
Yes.
quite frankly, you have to be very, very careful if you are a wounded individual to pick the
Mhm.
right person to spend your life with. So
Mhm.
that's just another cornerstone of therapy. It's not a therapist, but it's also picking someone who can help you along, because I was one hot mess,
Mm.
and not everybody would take me on. I had some very difficult relationships because of me and who I
Mhm.
was and what I was going through. Yeah.
Absolutely. LaBarbara says, when your self-esteem is attacked as a child, so many things can happen to you. Thank God you were covered and strong enough to look back on the oppression. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have done a lot of conversations about protecting your peace. More people actually experience trauma than they realize. It's actually about 70% of people, experience trauma on varying degrees, of course. So, can you talk to us a little bit more about how you operate and protect your peace? I don't get the impression that you are shy about ending a conversation, or if someone just doesn't match your energy, or you just don't get a good feeling about them. So tell us a little bit about that, on how other people can adapt a very similar mindset and protect their peace, so they have the space to flourish no matter what situation that they're in.
Well, I will bring this into the conversation because it does have a lot to do with protection. For one thing, I know that even though my situation occurred in the 50s and 60s, I am positive that it is still lurking in 2021 in many a household. I know it because people have told me that. I also want to mention, because this is important, that um, a block away from my grandmother's store, my grandfather had a store, and he sold leather goods. He sold purses and belts made of exotic animals, which of course would be my family. God forbid that they sell something that looked like J.C. Penney. It's all got to be crazy and unbelievable. But anyway,
Mm.
he was probably in his early 60s, and he was dating a waitress who worked in a diner nearby that was 19. So everything was very unordinary in my life. Very. There was such deviant sexual affairs going on. And also, I don't want to miss talking about this because I know that this exists.
Yeah.
My mother, oftentimes, if she would go on a trip, she would drop me off at my grandfather's house. And he would always expose himself to me. And it was horrifying.
Mm.
And a couple of years after that, my mother casually sat down with me and she said, when I was young, very young, your grandfather sexually abused me and my brother, your uncle. And I do believe he was a pedophile. In a casual way, she said this. And that right there was the stamp that said to me, this is unforgivable. This is not going to ever work. And as soon as I become legal age, I am going to divorce my mother and my family members. And I know
Mm.
this sounds outrageous, and so many people say that can't be done. Well, it can be done. Women can do this. Women that are taken advantage of can do it. They should do it. They must do it. But
Yes.
it takes an enormous amount of energy to do it. But you have to do it. There's no
Mm.
other question. So, my message is disconnect. You
Mhm.
must disconnect, no
Yeah.
matter what it is. If it's sexual molestation, if it's toxicity, disconnect. You cannot be in that environment and get better. It won't
Mm.
happen. It just won't.
I am deeply, deeply sorry that you had that experience. That is just, I'm sure, extremely traumatic, and especially on top of everything else that you have already had gone through at that time. Oh man! But I definitely agree with you that when you're experiencing some type of pain like that, that you have to isolate yourself or remove yourself from the source of the trauma. And a lot of times, especially with family abuse and sexual abuse, unfortunately, a lot of times people don't realize is that majority of the time a child is abused, it's from a family member or a close friend, someone close in the circle. And so, not to make anyone else paranoid, but you do have to guard and protect your children. And so I thank you, honestly, again, from the bottom of my heart for sharing that story because I'm sure it's not one that's easy to share. But I know that we're both praying that hearing that story will help protect someone else and another child to make sure that they have the protection that they need from a close family or loved one. And you have to believe children too. I mean, that's the other caveat. If a child brings you a concern, go ahead, Cindy. Looks like
No,
yes.
I was going to say, you're so right. When my mother passed away, and I was told this when the hospital called me, um, most of the people in her social circle didn't even know she had a daughter. That was one thing. But I will say to you that as opposed to walking around with huge amounts of anger, and that doesn't help anybody. For me, um, this is how I made peace. The hospital had called me out of the blue, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and the nurse said, "Your mother doesn't have long to live. We found that you're the only living family member. Do you want to come down?"
Mm,
And I had to think about it. And I remember putting my jeans on, and I got in my car. And of course, I was shaking. I hadn't seen her in a very long time. And I went to the hospital and I went to ICU. I didn't even know who the doctor was, and the doctor didn't know that my mother had a daughter.
mhm.
So, anyway, he brought me into the room, and I will tell you that I I was shocked, of course, at what I saw, but I also let her know that I forgave her.
Mm,
Now, I don't really think I forgave her, honestly, but I wanted her to hear that so that
mm.
she could leave this world in peace, because I can't imagine she was in peace with all the damage that she did. And for me, that was a very powerful moment and made me feel like I deserved the word survivor,
Oh, absolutely.
for sure. So I don't
Yeah.
know where we segued. I'm so sorry. It just
No,
fit
no, no.
in.
That was much needed and very appropriate for you to share that story. This is your moment for sure. So thank you very much for sharing that. Debbie says she's dealing with that now, sexual abuse with her niece and nephew that she now has custody of. So she says thank you, excuse me, for sharing that story as well. Linda brings up a very good point that I don't want to neglect to mention, but she said, so we have to listen to our children, but we also have to listen to what they don't say as well. And I want to make sure that we highlight that comment because sometimes as parents, you can make the mistake of getting so busy with your career, your friends, and other things that you have going on. But we have to make sure as guardians of our children, of our babies, no matter how older they get, that we pay attention to their body language. We pay attention and don't force children to hug someone or touch someone that they do not want to touch. And so we have to protect our children by giving them power, even at a very early age. I truly believe myself that children are one of the closest beings to God. And so if they do not feel comfortable being around someone, even if it's a family member, we have to listen to them. So I want to thank you, Linda, for mentioning that, that sometimes children don't even have the words, but we have to listen to their body language as well. So Cindy, you mentioned, when your mother passed away, that you wanted to tell her that you forgave her, even though you didn't feel like you had forgiven her yourself. Can you talk to us a little bit about your journey to actual forgiveness? and what that felt like for you.
Well, it was a very freeing experience for me to have the courage to do that and to let go. Of course, in my head, wounds, deep wounds, equal scars, and you cannot have laser surgery to get rid of these scars. As humans, these memories stay with us. Not all, of course not. With age, they go, but some definitely stay with us. And my message, and it's just my message to women who have been in extreme cruel situations, is don't, my message is never to say, forget about it, look the other way, exercise, go get a mani pedi, it's all going to get better, pray
Hmm.
about it. Those will never be my messages,
Yes.
ever.
Yeah.
My messages are, you must be a warrior. You are not a victim. You did not deserve this, and you deserve to be selfish. You
Mm.
must put yourself as number one, no matter what. And that is incredibly hard. To grow
Yes.
the seeds of self love is amazingly hard. It's like a
Mm.
garden that has a lot of weeds. You can't get rid of those weeds overnight,
Yeah.
but it's that self-love that you have to come to. And I can't say that I have abundance of it because I don't. And I have to be honest.
Hmm.
But I'm flourishing and I can put one foot in front of the other and I'm still here. So again, my lessons are, it isn't going to get better. I am sure of that. And that's what I try so hard to tell people that have had such experiences.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that too. Would you say that so establishing boundaries is sometimes challenging for women? Do you
Yeah.
think self-love goes hand in hand with strengthening our ability to be able to establish boundaries for ourselves and our
Well, I'm a real boy, I really have boundaries, let me tell you, after my life.
yes, you have
Um, I do not. I stopped being around critical people, narcissistic people at one point. I really purged my social circle.
to.
I
Mm.
had to. And it is imperative that you have boundaries. And if people make you feel uneasy or unhappy, I don't have a problem in letting go.
Hmm.
And I think it's essential that you let go. What good is it to have so many friends, but they're not the real thing?
Yes.
Um, I know right away when I meet someone whether it's going to work. And I don't pull out my dirty laundry and I don't want a pity party. I'm the last one that wants a pity party. What
Mhm.
I do want are kind human beings around me that don't judge me.
Yes.
So, yes, I definitely have my boundaries and I stick to them. It's important for my mental health.
Oh, absolutely. And that right there is what we're all about here at Bloom. And that's why you're a perfect person to be on the team. And so Laura said, you are a beautiful garden. We just want to point that out.
That's very kind.
She
Thank you.
definitely means it. So, can you talk to us about the importance of stories? You said you talked about about your experience as a journalist and how you share your stories through writing and things like that. Why is this so important to you, and how do you feel it helps people?
Well, this sounds really bizarre, but one of the things I love most about writing, of course, are the cathartic experiences that come from it. However, when I write, I have to have kind of an invisible life preserver nearby and
Mm.
maybe detox for a little bit because it can be painful. But the more I write, and I've been writing for many, many years, it really, really helps with the pain. The trick for me is I enjoy taking my stories and turning them inside out into very humorous, funny things. I don't write about all the pain that I'm talking about right now. at all. I grew up in a town that's so unusual. If you're a tourist, you really never get the full flavor of New Orleans. It's
Mm.
pretty, it's elegant, it's very sleazy, and it's also very magical. So I take characters that I have befriended in life and I write about them. And my stories, I try very hard to make them funny always. And the times that I've gone on stage and told my stories, I have had the audience laugh, and that means a lot to me because it
Mhm.
means that I've turned my train wreck of a life into something else. And
Mm.
there's so much to write about. Um, I'll just give you a few potato chips if you have time, in
Of
case,
course.
if ever you publish them. But for example, my grandmother had a very obese Chihuahua living in the showcase of her lingerie store. And the Chihuahua was named Cha Cha. And Cha Cha lived among these sexy mannequins, and she lived on a pillow and she had a little china plate with Wiener Schnitzel on it. And she hated everyone. And so I can develop some very, very funny stories just around that. The other thing is, um, my mother had a love for funeral homes, and funeral homes in New Orleans, some of them are like mansions. They are
Mm.
huge, they are beautiful. You'd never believe they were funeral homes. And my mother had a love affair with hosting her parties there. And that gives me an incredible amount of material to write about. And in fact, when her lover died, she had an amazing funeral that she put on in one of those places. So that's more material. So again, I'm taking these chapters of my memoirs and I make them funny.
Mhm.
That's the key. I really don't make anything sad, and sometimes I have to laugh at them while I'm writing them. One of the things that I love writing about are my grandmother would always have Sunday dinners, and we all had to report there. And it was jungle hot in her house. And we'd walk in, the plastic was on the pink shag carpet, the furniture was all in plastic, and she'd be in the kitchen making Wiener Schnitzel, and it was sizzling hot. And everyone would go to the table. And of course, arguments would start naturally. With a family this crazy, you have to have arguments. No one's going to talk about the weather. And so occasionally, and my family was Jewish, matzo balls would be hurled all over the room. And as a child, I would duck under the table. And
Oh,
that may sound horrific, but actually, I can write some really funny stories about those Sunday lunches. So that's what I do with my writing. That's
I
a
love that. I love that. I love that because a lot of times when people have challenges, no matter what they are, you internalize it into bad, negative energy. And for someone who's been in your situation and many experiences that you've shared, if you can turn your stories and put a more positive spin on it, because I think the biggest thing is the story that we tell ourselves is going to have probably the greatest impact on our ability to succeed. And so you being able to tell your stories in a positive light is going to be very inspirational and motivating to many, many people. And I admire you for being able to do that. And so I'm grateful that these stories is going to be on our platform. I also want to note, LaBarbara says, I agree, negative energy causes devastating weight on one's shoulders. Positive energy allows us to bloom. Absolutely. 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 So I have to ask you, Cindy, what's your new mission in life?
Well, my mission is definitely to continue writing. Writing is therapy for me. But, even more than that, I want to reach out and give my truth to others. I meet women a lot just in daily life that have been through not circumstances like mine, but very, very toxic. So toxic that it goes to the dermis instead of the
Mm,
third layer.
yeah.
And my mission is to reach out to them and let them know that they can get to the finish line, that
Hmm.
it requires a huge amount of work. But you have to do it. You must do it. And so if I can help anybody know that and that they can become a survivor and get out of that hellish situation, then I've done a good job. I feel like my journey, this is my third chapter, and I'm doing as good as possible. I think I'm doing pretty good. And I want to take others on my journey mentally. I want to take them by the
Yeah.
hand and let them know you are going to get there. But this is not easy street at all.
Yeah.
And you can't put a price tag on liberation. You can't.
Mm,
But the feeling that you get from it, it's kind of like the feeling I got when I picked up my 2 degrees. I can't put words on it. It was just so liberating. And so that's what my mission is really. Whoever I can touch is a huge achievement for me,
mm.
for
You're
sure.
you're going to definitely touch many people, Cindy. I know that to be very true. Laura mentions we need to hear stories of strong women who have persevered and flourished. I absolutely, absolutely agree. Sometimes we go throughout life and we have experiences with people and we see someone just as fabulous as Cindy. And sometimes we may doubt ourselves and our own abilities to become as strong, as graceful, as poised, as intelligent as she is. But through the art of storytelling, I really believe, in being vulnerable also, I really believe it gives people hope, it gives people understanding, and it helps people to be seen so they know the journey of that person and that they too can get to the other side of the chapter and feel strengthened as well. Debbie says, "You have touched me. Thank you and God bless you." I mean, that's
Oh, that's so sweet. That's very sweet.
definitely. So I'm so excited. I mean, Sydney has some amazing stories to share. I am honestly a fan myself. I've read quite a bit of her stories. I'm not going to spill all the beans. There was one in particular that was about never like being your true self. That when I got to the end of that story, literally a tear just came in my eyes, and it just, oh wow. So I'm very excited to be on this journey with you. I'm
Thank you.
excited for other people to join us on this journey. I'm excited that you're using your story to help other people. And so I want to ask you, what can our followers expect to hear?
What they will hear, I'm hoping that as you publish my stories and show them, that they laugh until their face hurts. Um, you know, you're not, I think you will probably forget a lot about the damage control, because I don't go there anymore.
Hmm.
But it's most definitely not fiction. And I want them to walk away feeling like, wow, that is really amazing. I didn't know that can happen in real life.
Yes.
And it can, and it did. And so I'll be very happy if they enjoy them. That's what I want to do, and bring that out. I want to take the most outrageous and put it on paper and just let it fly and make people really happy and laugh.
Oh, It's so beautiful. Oh, Cindy, I love you. Tracy says she absolutely loves your transparency. There's so much strength in you. I mean, honestly, to be able to be this authentic, this transparent about you, your story, and to shed so much light still at the end of the day on all of our lives. I am forever grateful to partner with you on this next journey. And I'm humbled that you're going to bless our blog and our platform. And I'm just very excited for the next chapter. I truly, truly am. I also want to encourage everyone to go to our website, www.whatwouldbloom.do.com. It's in the chat. Go ahead and subscribe to our website, and that way you'll be able to receive an email notification with all of Cindy's stories, so you can laugh, so you can feel enlightened and empowered to navigate throughout your day. And so let us know what you need, what do you want to hear, and just continue to connect with us. This is a platform for us women to grow together. And so by being transparent and sharing these stories like Cindy has so graciously done today, we will all bloom together. So thank you again, Cindy. I really appreciate you. You're
I
amazing.
appreciate you, and it's an honor to be able to spill the beans and help people, and that's what I want.
And that's
So
what you will do.
thank you so much.
I see subscribers coming in now as we speak. So people are very excited to hear your story. So you and I will have lots of conversations flowing in the future.
Yes.
I want to thank you all for joining us today and meeting our newest addition to the team, Cindy Small, the contributing writer for Blooom. I thank you all for being with us here today. Make sure you go onto our website and subscribe. Have a great, great, great rest of your day. And we love you all, and make sure that you continue to bloom to be the flower that we know that you all can be. And shed some light on somebody else's life too while you're at it. So we will talk to you soon. Have a great night. Thank you. Yay!
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.